on KGO 810.
And away we go on the Drex Radio Show, live and local in the Bay and around the world at KGORadio.com. Good evening, and thank you for joining me. And thank Dr. Tracey Wilen for joining me. She's a prominent leader throughout the technology sector, and she does a lot of women's leadership and career sessions. She's been a scholar at Stanford University and has held positions at Apple, HP, Cisco Systems, and my goodness, look at you. You're all over the place. 11 books, including Women Lead Perspectives from Workplace Leaders. Thank you for joining me, Doctor. I do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I think that this is very interesting. We're going to talk about Generation Z.
Yes. And Generation Z is the tail end of the millennials, age 1995. Born in 1995 or younger, so they're around age 20 or under, where millennials are ranging. They kind of overlap with the millennials who are 20 and to 34.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking it was starting from 2000, but you're saying 1995.
Right, so generations are really categorized not as much by birth year, but more about the experiences that they share. So this generation or segment of the millennials has had a different kind of experiences than the millennials that we've been talking about and you're hearing a lot in the news. Their background has been much more multicultural. In fact, over 50% have hybrid backgrounds. They've lived through cyclical recession, terrorism, cyber attacks, privacy concerns, and certainly much more immersive technology. So this sort of shapes their view in how they look at the world.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, they grew up with the internet, yes, so they don't know anything different.
Well, not only did they grow up with the internet, but just to contrast the millennials who grew up with maybe 2 devices, Generation Z is really growing up with 5 devices. So it's a much more immersive and pervasive use of technology than even our 20-year-olds that we typically talk about today with the millennial generation. So this group has a very different use of technology and also a different perspective on how to use it in the workforce or how they're going to be conducting their lives and their careers.
I think this is very, as I said, noteworthy that, it is a lot different. So tell me what you find different between the millennials and the Generation Z folks.
So what we're finding is because of these experiences that they've had and they've grown up with, which is very different than the millennials, they're much more self-directed, very concerned about their future. I mean, many of these Z generation have grown up where their parents, who are either boomers or Generation X, have been in and out of jobs, in addition to having millennial siblings who actually have spent a lot of money on college and didn't get a job, and they're still paying off education debts and perhaps moving home. And so they're looking at their life in a different way, saying, well, I need to be much more self-directed, much more concerned and actually pragmatic about my future. And because they're technical and have observed, really exciting shows like Shark Tank or just living, for example, in the Bay Area and seeing, startups like Uber or Facebook, they're much more entrepreneurial than the millennial generation just because they have more to their, more that they can use to really start with. So it's a very different perspective than the previous generation.
Now, March is Women's History Month, and you say, here come the Z women. Tell us more about that.
So March is Women's History Month, and throughout the whole month, we celebrate all of the accomplishments of women. And it can be everything from sports to different vertical groups, to different accomplishments. What I decided to do, because every year I do something for Women's Month, it's my contribution to celebrate. But this year I thought, well, the Z women are right in our midst, particularly in the Bay Area. And they're not only making, they're contributing to history, but they're really making what I call herstory, right? So let's look at the generation that's going to bring us into the future. And so that's why I focused on that. But you'll see throughout the Bay Area, throughout the U.S., throughout the U.K., Australia, to be a lot of different kind of events and celebrations about Women's History Month, which is throughout March.
And so, the Generation Z, back to, I know that they used to talking about they're differing from the millennials, but what can the Xers and the Boomers take away from what's going on with the Z generation?
So So, every generation brings in a contribution, and I think that's very important. The baby boomers have paved the way in so many different areas in contributions, and so is Generation X, and so are the millennials. So Generation Z is just our next generation of young people coming up. I think what, I look at them, and what I'm very impressed about this generation is there's a certain level of maturity about them. I constantly meet 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds who are actually starting next generation businesses. They're doing entrepreneur activities. They're doing community outreach. They're almost like young adults before we even knew that adult, was mature. And so I think this generation will bring in a different kind of balance and perspective and leadership into the workforce, blended with an adept use of technology and knowledge of how to use it and blend both the virtual and physical world.
And people talk about the millennials a lot and sometimes in a negative manner, which I don't think is fair at all. So I wonder how this impacts the workplace when you have Xers and boomers and then millennials having to face, here come the Z group, especially as people, I wonder specifically about the Xers and the boomers.
Yeah, so you're bringing up a very good point that most companies now are experiencing 3 generations in the workforce.
Right.
I have met companies now that have up to 5 generations in the workforce. I was talking to McDonald's, and their youngest employee is about 14 and a half years old on a part-time permit. And then Walmart, their oldest employee is 101, who's a gardener. And so there are many more complexities that we have to face as executives in the workforce that, how do you blend through the ideas and the expectations of 5 different generations? And most successful leaders will tell you that the key to it is really being able to, almost put your feet in their shoes and understand and value what they bring to the workforce. A way you can do that is just really through blended cross-functional teams, because every person has something that they can bring, and everyone has something that they can learn from someone else. So I actually think it's an enriched workforce rather than a negative, a factor, because in the past we used to just have like one generation in the workforce or 2.
And I totally agree with you. I think the whole blended workplace idea with multi-generations throughout the workforce is just a much more enriching process.
It is, and there's a lot of what we call reverse mentoring going on in some companies.
Good point, yes.
Where you see that the younger generation has the technology skills and they can mentor people who are maybe more seasoned and didn't experience that or understand it. But then we have very seasoned people who are experienced, who can certainly mentor younger people and help them, almost like, skip jump a couple of levels by understanding what's ahead of them and how to maneuver through company, company footprints in an easier way. But at the end of the day, what's important is actually having a company culture so that everyone understands, what is the company about, so that everyone is contributing in a certain direction.
Look out, America. Here comes Generation Z. That's right. And if you have any questions or you have any comments you'd like to make, 808-0810 is the number, 80-8810. We're speaking with Dr. Tracey Wilen, and we'll continue the conversation right after this quick break on the Drex Radio Show on KGO 810.
You're listening to the Drex Radio Show on KGO 810.
Yeah, I know that I let you down. Is it too late to say sorry now?
Well, I know your cup runneth over with stories about millennials, but not so much with Generation Z, which is next. Dr. Tracey Wilen is my guest, and she has authored 11 books, including Women Lead, Perspectives from Workplace Leaders, and she is one for sure. So again, thank you for joining me, Dr. Tracey. We were just talking. I have an intern who would be Generation Z, and if you would, Dwayne, he was talking about the fact that he's going to San Francisco State. Every single course, am I right? It's involved social media, am I right?
Yeah, I take a lot of broadcasting courses, and most of them either point towards or relate to some aspect of social media. So we kind of get that social media background compared to others who probably didn't have any idea of the components. Social media.
Okay, so Dr. Tracey, so this is infiltrating all areas of education at this point, so parents need to understand.
Oh, sure, and I think it's fantastic that he's having this integrated experience, because he's exception for some of the other interns that I have talked to who have felt that they have not been prepared by their colleges or universities. So I think we have an exception, here in the Bay Area, and there's a lot of emphasis on technology, but unfortunately a lot of students don't have that. So I think, you're definitely much more equipped than other people coming out of college or pursuing internships.
But one of the things that I enjoy so much with having interns and someone who is Generation Z, things that are important to me, especially working in the media, for instance, Snapchat. I didn't know what it was other than the messages disappear. It's so much more, and he's taught me things about this, and knowledge is power. So I can see where it's advantageous, once again, back to the workforce thing, to integrate these people of all generations into your workforce. Yes.
Yeah, so I'd be curious, it's Dwayne, correct? So
Dwayne, yes.
If you could just give me some of your observations of what it's like to work with, perhaps you're working with some baby boomers, perhaps you're working with some Generation X.
Gen X.
And what's your impression of that, and how's the integration going for you?
I feel like it's great. It's like a mentorship. I feel like I'm getting experience and insight from different backgrounds and generations. So I feel like it's a great thing to have, and it's actually helping me out for things that I might experience in the future.
So let me ask you this: how prepared, or what do you feel that schools could do either better or to help you be prepared for the career and the internship that you're taking?
Well, I feel like a lot of schools should have more hands-on classes. There are more theory classes at SF State, and although there are hands-on courses to take, I feel like having that hands-on experience and actually getting into the different aspects of the industry will prepare you better for when you're pursuing jobs and pursuing different opportunities, because then you would already know what to expect, essentially.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, and that resonates with a lot of young people. What's your perspective on what you think you'd like to do career-wise? So many young people who I meet today are very interested in having their own business and not necessarily working for large organizations. What's your thoughts on that?
My end goal with my career is always changing, but right now I'm focusing more on maybe pursuing radio more, and maybe dabbing into digital media and digital reporting, only because it incorporates the internet and online podcasts. I feel like the internet is the future, and it connects so many people at once, and it's timeless. You can basically go on any news outlet and access anything you want anytime. But that's where I am right now.
So let me ask you another question. If there was something that you felt was totally misunderstood about your generation that other people should know, what would that be?
I feel like the assumption that we're all entitled is something that needs to be addressed.
That's good stuff.
We
yes.
are not all entitled. Some of us work really hard to get where we are and to gain the opportunities that we have. And most of us are very humble. It's just like the 2% or the less than 1% that may, portray entitled qualities.
No, it's very good. That's a very
great
good
observation.
Point.
Yes, and I mean, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, Doctor. I mean, the millennials take so much heat, and obviously Generation Z does too. That you've got the Xers and the Boomers saying, "Well, they feel entitled." No, I don't see that happening. Not around me.
No, and I would say that the view of the world is completely different. As I mentioned before, that the millennials grow up with 2 devices, and now Generation Z is growing up with 5 devices. And, when I look at, if I had grown up with that, I would look at the workforce and say, why on earth? Number one, I would want to be fully remote. because why on earth, if I'm collaborating with thousands of people like mine around the world, why on earth would I drive to an office, except here we Uber or Lyft, to an office to reduce the number of connections I have and be in a physically contained environment? And I think it's understanding that because of this amount of technology and connections and social media, however you get out there, that, you know, the old traditional structures and formats really aren't relevant anymore. And so it's just a completely different mindset about how you approach work, how you approach collaboration, how you get things done. And I think that can be, you know, easily misinterpreted unless you do, you know, as we said, you know, a little more understanding.
Yes, and you know what? It reminds me of big flashing yellow lights, warning to big corporations and companies that these people are thinking differently and definitely outside of our box.
Very much outside our box. I mean, I joke that, you know, my nephew is a Generation Z, and he grew up on gift cards. He understands PayPal and Apple Pay. I don't even know if he knows what cash is, you know. So we
exactly.
Have to
we were just talking about that.
Right. So, you know, you really have to think forward of what is it like when you're growing up in an increasingly digital world. What is the new kind of paradigms that you'll be solving problems in, the new kind of work paradigms that we need to offer people or morph into, and it's so that it's not so alien for the people who you know, who only know the physical world, but it's very comfortable so that other people who are younger and more technical can move into it. So I would agree.
Dr. Tracey Wilen, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I'd love to chat with you again sometime.
Oh, thank you both. I really appreciate it.
You bet. All right, let's take